Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Large Format Photography Podcast. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by my co-host Andrew Bartram. Hello Andrew.
Hello Simon.
And it's just us, just the two of us this week. Well, sort of, because you've been out and about, haven't you, Andrew?
I have, yeah, doing our first large format photography podcast outside broadcast. That sounds very grand, doesn't it?
It does. Was it streaming around the world when you did it?
No, it was I don't think it was my finest moment really, but the circumstances were not ideal. I was in a workshop and there was people making tea, and at one point there was music playing and so on. But I did my best.
It sounds fine, and I think it's worth just mentioning where you were, because you were on the south coast, and I'm not sure. Did we mention it on the last podcast where you were going?
I'm not sure. Do you want me to tell listeners?
Yeah, let's put them out the misery now, because they're on the edges of their seats.
Yeah, so I about 10 days ago, I, with a lot of effort, manipulated my Devere 504 enlarger out of the darkroom and into the back of the car and drove down to Brighton to the workshops of Odyssey De Vere. And that's a company that's run by John Boyce, who you're going to be hearing from shortly in our little outside broadcast section. And John, basically, to cut a long story short, gave it a bit of a service, cleaned it up, replaced some missing screws and things that I didn't even realise were missing, hoovered out the dead insects, and gave me some hints and tips on how to level it. And I went down a few days ago and took the opportunity to do a little interview with him, because it's a very interesting story. And the fact that he's still there to this day in his late 70s, servicing enlargers, selling secondhand, and he's in some new enlargers as well. But that's not really where his future lies. But the fact that he's still there, and it's a small family-run company, and it's got such a wonderful heritage, which he talks about in the interview.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to it earlier this morning. And I really enjoyed it. It was quite fascinating to hear the history of the Devere company and how it got its name, and the changes that it's gone through, and how it is where it is now. Because it's quite circular, isn't it? Really, in some respects, how it started and where it is now.
Yeah.
So, it's a good listen, and the plan is that we're going to do pretty much our usual thing. We're going to chat about what we've been up to. Then we're going to do some emails, and then we're going to hand back over to you on your trip to Brighton down to see John Boyce at Odyssey De Vere, and that will be it. So that will be the show. I think the actual recording that you'll hear is about, I think it's just under an hour, and it's a good recording. And just so that our listeners know, it was your first time with this device, and lent to us by the master of photography, Neil Piper. And
thanks, Neil.
And it's. And by the way, I was just going to say your recorder, your Olympus recorder, is in the post, Neil. But actually, by the time this goes out, you would have already had it. So that's a bit superfluous, really, isn't it? But no, it did a really good job. You did a good job, and I think it's a really good listen.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. On the downside about your recording.
Oh, here you go. You know what they call this in business, don't they? I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. You're about to deliver a shit sandwich, aren't you? That's what you drink.
Well, it's just the record is in three parts, and that was partially down to a technical failure with batteries and things like that. And
what you mean they ran out?
Yes, and there was another bit where I think you wanted to pause it for a reason, and I think each time that it stopped, you goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. Simon will sort this out in the editing." And I've listened to it, and I think, how on earth am I gonna join this lot together? Because
I don't know. Yeah. I was panicking.
Yeah. Well, this is a pro tip to anybody that wants to do a podcast and
don't do what we do.
Yeah, or anybody that's a host of a podcast. That if you want to enable some editing, then it's a good idea to draw breath in between the bit where you say, "Oh, this, don't worry, he'll edit it," and then carry on talking.
I know, and I do know that. It's just that it all common sense went out the window when I was there with him, and part of me was in fear that I was going to somehow lose what I'd already recorded, because at one point I just thought I'd lost that first 5 minutes. When we were talking about me taking the enlarger down and what he'd done, and I was convinced I'd lost it because I wasn't familiar with the with the equipment, you see. So there's the other tip: get really familiar with the equipment before you go and use it. Not like this numpty, just sort of kind of turn up and wing it.
Well, I know what you went through. Speaking as somebody that's actually managed to lose 2 entire podcasts.
Yeah.
I know that feeling all too well. So no, you did a good job, and it's going to be a case. It's a little bit rustic in places. Just so you know. So you will have about 55 minutes of unedited Andrew Bartram coming at the end of the show. But it's well worth listening to. So do stick with it after we say goodbye. Okay, let's get into. Actually, no. Before we talk about what we've been up to, I just want to say thank you to Brendan Barry for being our guest 2 weeks ago. Really enjoyed that show, and that was a show we had problems with audio. So I do apologise about the audio quality, both from myself and from Brendan as well. I mean, I was having problems because I wasn't using my normal mic, so that was giving me difficulty. So actually, this is 2 weeks of technical difficulties, isn't it? So hopefully we'll be back on an even keel pretty soon. So let's talk about our weeks, what we've been up to, and so let's head over to the Fens and see what's been going on in your world, Andrew.
Well, to add to our level of professionalism this week, I'm not actually in the Fens. I'm sitting in my hotel room in Chester, so that's devotion for you, isn't it?
It's yeah, you just shattered people's illusions now.
I could be in the pub, on my 5th pint, and no, I'm sat here not having had a drop of alcohol, speaking to you, lovely folks.
Actually, that's the point. You've just, I think about an hour ago, you posted a photograph in our Facebook group, which is the large format photography podcast.
Can see me.
Facebook group, and so there was a selfie of Andrew in his Chester room, and it's in a very short period of time it attracted a few comments there. One from Cameron Shaw, who very very much appreciates what you do, and which was us as I guess by extension. There's a question there from, is it Mark Fole? I don't know how you pronounce that surname, sorry Mark, about where's your lab box, and just in case people are wondering why is he asking where's your lab box.
Oh well, it's my expensive microphone stand, so I get my microphone at the right height. I didn't bring it with me, you'll be surprised to know. Well,
this is it, and it is an important feature, an important tool, because as Andrew knows, I may have mentioned before, my microphone, which is exactly the same microphone, it's a cheap one from Amazon, and it sits on a Kodak box, an automatic tray siphon box, which I know you want this item, but it just looks too good. So I just use it as a mic stand. So it does a good job.
I keep dropping hints to you, but you don't seem to take them.
That's it. And then there was one final comment there from Ben Reynolds, who suggested that you've blown your highlights out in the shot and you need some kind of pyro camera app if such an app actually really exists.
Or maybe the digital file in my iPhone was probably a bit overdeveloped. I need to pull the developing time back a bit. That's probably what I need to do.
There is that. So you're somewhere in Cheshire at the moment, and so
I am.
So what else you been up to?
Well, developed some slide film and made a slideshow, but that's nothing to do with large format, so we'll skip over that. But that was really exciting. And I've been coating some watercolour paper with liquid emulsion. Now, there's a story behind that, because was it last Saturday I was in Huntingdon, which is our nearest biggest town, about 8 or 9 miles from where I live. and I popped into the Oxfam bookstore and vinyl store. I've been in there once before, but I got chatting with the manager, and I'd bought a book by Les McLean. Have you heard of Les McLean, Simon? I think we might have mentioned him in the show.
Doesn't ring a bell.
I was aware of him from years back, and he very much, I don't know whether he pioneered it, but he kind of flew a flag for split grade printing, and I found his book in this charity shop for $2.99. So I took the book up to the counter, and the guys started talking about the book, and he said, "Oh, do you take pictures or something?" I said, "Yeah, got a darkroom, and and do photography up to 4x5." And at the end of it, he said, "Well, would you like to show some pictures in our window? We have rotating displays of local, photographers and artists." He says, "I'm assuming you can produce some nice prints." And so I showed him some Fenland stuff on my Flickr site, which he liked. And so I'm going to have a little mini exhibition in the Oxfam window in January, which is very exciting. Well, I think it's very exciting anyway.
No, I agree with you. Actually, when we were chatting about this earlier, I said at the time, I thought you were going to say you've got yourself an exhibition in that phone box that we were talking about with Brendan.
In the Prick Willow phone box.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's next. Steady on. I need to start low, I'll start with Oxfam window, and then I'll move up to Prick Willow phone box. Anyway, so I've been thinking about this, and I'm waiting for the enlarger to come back, the Devere. So I got that back the other day, and John Boyce, who we'll hear from in a little while, had said, "Well, why don't we take it to bits, and then you can put it in your car, and it makes it a lot easier." Yeah, it did, but it took me a while to figure out how to put the whole thing back together. It wasn't that bad. It's just that I clearly didn't listen properly to what he said to me. And now in the back of my memory, I remember him saying, "Whatever you do, don't loosen that particular wheel there until you've got the head connected securely to the top of the enlarger." So what did I do? I loosened this hand wheel, and the head carrier shot at a rate of knots up the column and nearly took the top off the enlarger. And I thought, oh no, I thought I'd broken it. In fact, I'm still not convinced I haven't done some damage internally. And later on, I found the handbook, and it says, whatever you do, if you loosen that wheel while the head isn't connected, just make sure you put your hand on top of it to stop it shooting up to the ceiling where it might cause damage. I thought, yep, that's it. So I think it's okay. It seems to be working. So I got all that back, and I thought, well, what am I going to do for this exhibition? And I've got a number of large format Fenland negatives, some of which I've made prints from, prints that I weren't entirely happy with. So I thought, well, it's an opportunity for me to go back and reprint some of this stuff from 2 or 3 years ago. And then I thought, well, why don't I try liquid emulsion? Now, I've had some liquid emulsion in my fridge for a couple of months now, and I've been waiting for a project to use it on. So I thought, well, okay, I'll try some Fenland shots with liquid emulsion brushed onto watercolour paper. Now, you can use liquid emulsion and brush it on bits of wood or whatever you want, but let's try paper to start with. And of course, Graham Vasey is the person I know who does this a lot. So I bought some Rolly Black Magic Grade 3 emulsion, which is you can take the top off in a dim red safe light, and it's just like rubber. So you have to kind of scoop a bit out and melt it a bit at a time, in a hot water bath, which I did. And using a brush, I coated these bits of paper. That's as far as I've got at the moment, Simon. So my intention is I'm going to pick one negative to start with, and so I can treat this watercolor paper just like a normal photo paper now, and do a test strip and determine the exposure. Now, there is a suggestion that I might need to size the paper, which with some gelatin. Now, I had some gelatin in the cupboard, but it was food grade gelatin, and I read somewhere because it's got quite a high bloom factor. You see how technical I'm getting now with my gelatin? If it's got a too high a bloom factor, when silver nitrate, certainly for salt printing, so it may be the same for liquid emulsion, when it comes into contact with this high bloom gelatin, it can oxidize the silver. Certainly in salt printing, so I'm not sure if it works the same way. So at the moment, I've just taken some watercolor paper that I had in the darkroom, and I've coated 3 sheets. And then I was in the dark, and I thought, okay, now I can't open the door of the darkroom because it's going to let light in, and they were too big to go in the paper safe. I thought, oh, I'm such an idiot, I can't now get out of the darkroom. I'm going to have to stay in here for days while they dry off. So I found a print box in the bottom of the darkroom, so I shoved them in there and loosely laid a bit of black card over the top and ran out of the darkroom. And hopefully, when I next go back in, I can retrieve them and do some tests.
I'm really looking forward to seeing those. So that episode with Graham, we touched upon the subject and the different ways how we do it, but I think we only scratched the surface there, didn't we? Really, we
did. Yeah, I've got a great book, and it's one that Graham used when he was getting into it, and it's called Liquid Emulsion. I think it's out of print now, but it was written by the guys who run Silver Print, who used to be in London and now down in Devon. So I'll just make a note here to try and look it up for the show notes. It's Liquid Emulsion. That's Martin Reed, certainly is one of the authors. And that's a great book because it goes right from the basics, and then it uses examples by lots of artists who use liquid emulsion in lots of different situations, and I've spoken about her before, but Tina Rowe, who we spoke to on the Lensless podcast a while back, she uses liquid emulsion and brushes it on oyster shells that she then projects images onto of found photographs from sort of charity shops of families, and old pictures of soldiers and goodness knows what.
I remember Tina Rowe being on the Sunday 16 podcast. That was the first time I came across her. And she was talking about this, and I had no idea what on earth she was doing. I think, I think she probably explained what it was, but that was back in the days where I'd pretty much forgotten everything about film photography. I think I was still more interested in digital photography at the time. And I was like, well, how did they even get the images on? So she's painting some stuff onto the shells, and then so what happens next? And that I could not work it out. So I assume an enlarger or a projector is involved in this process. Is that right?
Well, what Tina will do, because she's looking at it from a very thoughtful, artistic base, because she's what's known as transracial adoptee. That's what she would describe herself as. So she's brought up in a white family, and I don't know whether she was in touch with her original family, but she certainly has issues. She talked quite openly to Cora and me about this, issues around knowing quite who her family was and being brought up in quite an alien environment. So she expresses this in part now through going down onto the riverbank, the Thames riverbank, and mudlarking for oyster shells. And if you wander around bits of the London shoreline along the Thames, along the South Bank, for instance, as the tide goes out, you find all sorts. I was there at the weekend, and I found little bits of oyster shells and bits of clay pipe and all sorts of stuff like that. And so she finds these oyster shells which have been discarded. So there's sort of one element of what she's working through. So this discarded element in the oyster shell. And then she brushes this liquid emulsion. So you do that under a red safe light and put it somewhere to dry. And then she finds old found photographs or old negatives, which she puts in the enlarger. So here again, we've got some lost family. There's questions around identity and heritage, and genealogy and who they are and where they, are their family members looking for these people now, and she projects the image down onto the oyster shell, and of course it's not a flat plane, so bits of the image become distorted, slightly out of focus, and you just need to go to her Instagram site and you can see the results, and they're hauntingly beautiful. And of course it's speaking to her own personal situation. Yeah. So I'm going to see how this works. If it's, I've got till January to try and work on this, and I thought if I can get a nice looking print using this process on watercolor paper, I'll take it into the man in the Oxfam store and says, well, what about this sort of thing? And if he likes it, I'll do 2 or 3 slightly different ones, and that'll be the little mini exhibition. If not, I'll make traditional gelatin silver prints using Ilford paper. So that's it. That's kind of my week, really. Coating paper, developing slide films, and setting up and nearly destroying the enlarger in the process.
Right. Well, it seems like ages since I've actually gone out and actually taken a photograph with a large format camera. Something that I think something I need to do something about. So I certainly need to get out there. I've got plenty of paper. I managed to pick up some FP4, some expired FP4 for a very reasonable price, and then the seller offered me another pack at an even more reasonable price, and I thought, well, there you go. So now I've got at least 50 sheets of FP4 I can do something with.
Excellent.
So need to make use of that. I need to do something with Caffeinol.
Yeah, I've developed FP4 in Caffeinol CL. Seems to work well.
Well, we were put onto that by Wayne Setzer.
We were.
And actually, to that point, I think we've talked about the Emulsive Secret Santa event, which is now too late for people to join. But the idea behind it is you send something to another person anonymously, or potentially anonymously, and somebody will send something to you, and it's not a two-way thing. It's like a round robin thing, and the idea is one of the things is like you need to put up something about what it is that you might want. So to give a bit of an idea for your Santa to go out and buy something appropriate. And my Secret Santa list pretty much is links to wet plate supplies and Caffeinol ingredients. So I'm hoping Santa's going to come through for me there, although Santa's not actually been in touch with me yet. Yeah. I've been in touch with the person I'm giving to, but nobody's been in touch with me yet. So
have you got Mr. G. Rinch? Is he your contact?
It's possible. Although, to be fair, last year, which was the first time I did it, I was in contact with somebody. I say a chap, I have no idea, because he never actually made himself known to me. But he sent me some, and I've mentioned it before. I got some possibly X-ray film, or at least it's orthochromatic and probably ISO 25. I've still haven't actually quite worked it out yet. But he sent me a load of stuff, and that film was cut down from larger sheets. So it was a lovely thing I got last year. I didn't have any contact until quite late on, until he'd actually sent the product. So it's quite possible that my Santa's doing exactly the same, or they're not doing anything. So who knows? That's the fun of the game, I guess. So there's that, and I've done a few things. I haven't been taking pictures, but I picked up, having been on a photo walk in Liverpool with a few chaps there on the Mersey meetup, and Stigger the Dump was one of the people on that walk, and I've got a cup of tea heading my way now. Just bear with me. Thank you very much. So, 1 cup of tea. Good service today. So I was having a chat with Stig about digitising, and because I'm still not quite in the position to be able to print large format, although we're edging closer to the day when a large format enlarger will head to the 6 Towns darkroom, which I'm part of, and I think you talk a little bit about it actually in the chat with John Boyce. But back onto this bit. In the meantime, I still want to digitise my larger negatives, like whether it be large format or medium format for that matter. And I've been struggling a little bit getting it right, because I'm using a camera, I'm not using a scanner, and really taking a single shot of a 5x4 is sort of missing the point a little bit in terms of resolution and so on. Although at the end of the day, if all you're doing is sharing stuff on Facebook and Instagram, it doesn't really matter.
No.
But I would like to print. But I also like to have things at a good resolution. So if I do digitize 4x5, then I will take probably 6 photographs of the negative and stitch them together. But a problem I've been encountering, and the problem seems to be getting worse, not better, is getting an even light source across the whole negative. Now, 35mm, it's quite easy to get that even light source, but the larger that negative gets, the harder it is to get that truly even light. So when you expect, and this really causes a problem when you're actually stitching photographs together, because you get light parts on the edges of the photographs, and it will show in the final image. And Stig recommended a tracing pad, a particular tracing pad. It was only about £25 on eBay, including delivery.
Yep.
And I'm going to use the microphone like a singer now and just carry it with me as I head over to it. And it's called an AGP Tech LED tracing pad, A4 size, and it just plugs into your computer or wherever via a USB power source. And it's a lovely flat light. I've not had to go digitizer with it yet, but it appears to be really good. It's very, very promising. And I've looked at light sources, and usually they seem to be really expensive. And this one seems to be a sensible price, and I think it's going to work. I just need to cut a mask around. I'll use a bit of mat board or something like that, and cut around it so I don't get any light creeping up around the edges, and give it a go.
Well, I have one of those. Did you say you bought yours on eBay or Amazon?
Amazon.
Yeah. So I think they're all churned out by one or a handful of Chinese factories, and they're all around that price. Mine's got 3 light levels on it. You just a touch sensitive pad, and it just increases the light levels. And it was called a tracing pad, and it was just 20 odd quid, and it's perfect. I use it as a light box for viewing negatives, but it's a good even light, and I'd imagine it would work quite well for what you want.
Yeah, well, certainly fingers crossed. And actually, on the subject of digitizing, because I mean, a lot of people will be using the scanner if they are digitizing, or doing the method that my preferred method of using a digital camera. In a few weeks, I'm hoping it's going to be a few weeks, because I've been waiting to do this now for quite some time. But Hamish Gill has got this thing called a pixelator that he's been working on now for probably close to 2 years, and it looks and that it went through Kickstarter and is oversubscribed and so on and so on. And it got to the point where actually it was to fulfill the orders in the way that he initially produced it, it wasn't really going to be particularly easy to do. So he pretty much redesigned it and did it in a way that's more sustainable in the long term for production. And it's been an absolute nightmare for him. But it looks like he's on the edge of that being finished, and it's ultimately a device that you can digitize 35mm up to 5x4. And it's a very simple thing. It's basically got a piece of diffused acrylic, and it's got a gate system that you open and close depending on the size of the negative that you want to do, and it will effectively then hold the negative in place. So that's one of the tricky little things that you get with digitizing. So hopefully that's going to be ready soon. And on the Classic Lenses podcast, we're going to be doing a special, if you like, where we're going to be talking about digitization, and we'll have Hamish on the show, and we're going to have Nate, who's the chap behind Negative Lab Pro, which is a Lightroom plugin, which it's almost a one-click solution for turning negatives into viewable positives, including color negatives, which is pretty much the hardest thing to get right. And his program works fantastically. So we're going to have a special about different ways of doing it, and we'll go into a bit more detail about doing that kind of thing with the DSLR or mirrorless camera if that's going to be of interest to people.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know digitizing is because most folks have this kind of hybrid workflow, don't they? And not everyone has the space or the inclination to make wet prints in a darkroom. So, and even if they do have a darkroom, you still probably want some way of digitizing negatives.
Actually, that's a point. The photos that you digitize, are they photos of your photos?
Some, yeah. So my preference is to make a darkroom print and then make a scan.
Right, scanning the print, yeah.
Yeah, just on I have an Epson V500, so that does scan medium format negatives, or with some jiggery pokery, I could scan 4x5s in 2 halves, and then if I was clever enough to learn how to do it, stitch them together. Yeah. Alex Purcell certainly does that, and I'm sure he'd help me. But to be honest, I'd rather poke my eyes out with a cocktail stick, quite frankly. So I quite like the idea that the only way I can digitize 4x5 is to go in the darkroom. It makes me go in the darkroom and make a print, which I don't do enough of, but that's the idea, really. So, and then I scan negatives for stuff I'm less emotionally involved with, maybe, Yeah. Having said that, I've been doing a little project with a pinhole camera all about my feelings for staying away in hotel rooms, and they're all negative scans, and at some point they will become prints, but at the moment they're just negative scans. I mean, having a negative scan sometimes gives you a bit more of a feel for the image, doesn't it? You can do a contact print in the darkroom, I suppose, but you do a negative scan, see if you want to make a print of it.
Yeah, well, I don't have a scanner at all, so when I've tried to take photographs of a photograph, you always get loads of reflections, or I haven't quite worked out how to take a photograph of a photograph without getting reflections. Yep. So it didn't never quite work out for me.
Well, you could pick up a Epson V500, which is a real good workhorse for probably less than £100 now.
Yeah, I've used the scanner before, and I've used the 550. And I'm not enamoured with it, to be honest. But although I keep on, I think I've got a search on eBay for the V800, which seems to be the one that would make sense for me. It
does. That also, because that does your 4.5, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think. And also, 10, I think.
It may well do. And who was I watching? I was watching a video tutorial, or somebody was using one of these, and I think it's actually got adjustable feet on the negative carriers on those ones, so you can adjust it to get optimum distance. I don't know quite where these things focus, but he was suggesting that this adjustment of the negative carrier is quite helpful. He'd done some experiments showing that if he adjusts it one way, he gets nice sharp images, whereas he thought he was getting sharp images until he adjusted the feet on this carrier. But on the V500 and the 550, I don't think they have these adjustable feet.
Right.
So, yeah. But, yeah, once you've got your enlarger in your six times darkroom, you might not.
Well, I've got to say, that's the other thing about, I'm saying, like, I haven't been out and taken any photographs. That pretty much, it's not just large format. I'm hardly taking photographs of anything. And that's because at the moment I'm pretty much addicted to doing stuff in the darkroom.
Yeah, and I think that's really good, Simon, because as I was pondering this little exhibition thing, I thought, I can't remember the last time I felt as though I'd caught up with the backlog of negatives, and it's very easy to get into that rut of just shooting more and more negatives, and if you're not scanning, they're just piling up, and I begin to feel a bit overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that I've got, and I need to just spend more time in the darkroom. And that's it really for me.
Yeah, no, I know where you're coming from, and I say that leads me into another thing. This weekend, just gone, it was the latest, or the last of the year of the Wolverhampton Camera Fairs, and I was chatting to Paul of Commercial Cameras, who's based in Church Stretton in the UK in Shropshire, and I was talking about the darkroom club we had, and he just goes, "Well, do you see that tray there with odds and sods of paper? You can have that." Because somebody says, "Yeah, will this go to a good home?" And I guess the 6 times darkroom is classed as a good home, because I took this paper back with us, and it's a treasure trove. It's just not none of it is just normal paper. There's cool tone there's some Kentmere bromide paper, but the thing that, well, there's 2 papers that caught my eye, and Paul Bullock is a listener of this show. He's also a member of of our Facebook group, and he comes along to the 6 Times Darkroom when he can. And he was there with us on this week, and he did an absolutely brilliant job of explaining to Fraser Ewell, who also dropped in. He didn't come specifically from Scotland to join us, but he on his way through, on the way through to Cheltenham, I think he was still with us around about 11:15 at night. I think he enjoyed himself. But Paul Bullock spent some time with both myself and Fraser, because Fraser's never actually been in the darkroom at all and never done a print.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I could show Fraser how to do this, but frankly, Paul actually really knows what he's talking about, whereas I don't. So I asked Paul, and Paul more than happily stepped up on that one, and did a really good job of explaining what paper we use, why, how you set things for different contrast and why, and how long you would do things for, and so on. And we probably printed off about 8 sheets, 8 photos to get something close to what Fraser would like. And it was just an absolutely fantastic evening. So I just want to thank Paul again, and it was great to see Fraser again. But the reason I'm just thinking, how did I get there? And that was because Paul picked out that there's a couple of boxes of Seagull paper. I think it's Seagull.
Yep.
And he goes, "That's really good, that is." And you get those lith printers will like that.
Yep. So, it's wasted on you, Simon. us lith printers, meaning me, would love some of that.
So what's so special about the Seagull paper? Why does a lith printer want this stuff?
Well, I don't think it's just for lith printing, but it does take to lith printing terribly well, and some papers do, and some papers don't, and it's down to the the way these papers are made. I can't give you any more technical information than that, but some Tim Rudman in the past, and indeed still does, if you want to learn about lith printing, you just Google Tim Rudman. You can sign up to his newsletter, and I think if you go onto his site, it gives you the latest papers or the latest information on the papers that are out there that'll still lith print really well. So I'm using a FOMA paper, multigrade fiber paper, and it's got the coding number on there, 131 and 132. One is matte and one is semi-matte or gloss possibly, and they produce a beautiful, well, it starts off as a salmon color and it changes through to a sort of golden color, tones, and you can get really delicate creamy highlights and dark golden blacks, and it looks great. You using a very dilute lith developer, so not lith paper, which is would have been used for very high contrast, copying reproduction techniques, but using normal photographic silver chloride or silver bromide papers, chlorobromide papers probably is the correct term, and some lith really well. The Ilford papers don't tend to so much. Some of those firmer ones do. Forte papers, if you can find them. I think some of the Agfa papers certainly did. And that Seagull, Oriental Seagull, I think that's probably what it is, isn't it? Oriental?
I think it's something like that.
Yeah. But I think it was generally well regarded as quite a well-made silver-rich printing paper that did actually lithe well.
Well, the other thing that Paul mentioned about it was that you have to snatch it out, don't you? Because apparently you've got to catch it at the right moment and get it stopped.
Yep. So you have you need to do it in trays as opposed to my slot processor. And typically what you do is find any negative is fine, really. And you just make a quick test print in the darkroom to get a normal, what you think looks about normal. If that's, say, 10 seconds, don't worry about contrast filters. Just print it with no contrast filters. So that's a sort of nominal grade 2. And you take that base time and as a starting point, multiply it by 3 stops. So 10 seconds to 20 to 40 to 80 seconds. So 80 seconds becomes your exposure time. So you're grossly overexposing this paper. And then you take your lithe developer, which is very highly dilute and very low activity, and you put your paper in there. And probably in my case, after about 10 minutes of agitating, you need to keep the print agitating constantly. After about 10 minutes, you begin to see an image forming. I normally switch the safe light off because there's no such thing as a safe light, really. So I switch it off until I know the image is going to start forming. I switch it back on again after 8 or 9 minutes. And then you just have to keep watching the blacks. And I have a darkroom, I have a torch with a red filter over it, and I use that as well to see where I'm going. And you just have to judge the point where you think the blacks have increased in enough density for what you're after, and you see them, and this is a process called infectious development. So the blacks suddenly start racing away, and there'll be a point when if you don't snatch it and chuck it straight in the stop bath, the blacks just will fill up completely. Now, if you don't like the highlights, if you think the highlights are too, there's not enough detail in them, they're burnt out, then you can adjust the exposure. So by giving it another stop, so 80 seconds become 160, you're giving even more exposure to the highlight areas, and so you actually end up reducing the contrast a little bit and bringing the highlights in a bit. So the more exposure you get, you reduce the contrast in the lithe print. And that's all fairly basic stuff, and there's lots more you can do to it. You can tone the resultant images in selenium and other things. There's a great site in Germany, Wolfgang Moresch, Moersch, I think it is. And he's like he's a great guy to follow on Instagram, Wolfgang Moresch. And he sells chemicals, he sells lithable papers. He's got lots of techniques and a great resource if you want to get into lithe printing.
Well, I think that's this should give you another reason to come along to the Six Towns darkroom, because you can come down and give us a masterclass on lithe printing as well now, because we've got the stuff awaiting you. Yep.
No, happy to do some lithe printing when I get down there.
Yeah, that's good. Well, there was another far more specialist than that Seagull paper, and it was Bromoil paper. Have you heard of Bromoil paper?
Yeah, there was a guy famously in the 80s, and his name was, I think this was his name. His name was Gears Sprint or something, G-E-E-R, something like that.
Yeah.
Do you know, is that have I got that right? I don't know.
Gers something.
Yeah, it's a bit like Scheinflug.
Yeah, except he's very English, but not with that name. So
I remember going to Rayleigh Camera Club about 30 years ago, and someone giving a Bromoil demonstration, and I've got some articles on how to do it in old copies of Darkroom User, probably magazine. And you have to produce things called matrices, and there's inking out involved, and it's all a bit of a palaver from what I remember, but you can get some beautiful painterly type sketchy like results. Bromoil.
That's it. Well, I think we'll put a link in the podcast notes for people to follow this, because It's a 5-part documentary. Gerspitz, except it's not. Is the chap anyway, and
is he still alive or is he dead now?
Well, it's when I've looked him up, it does talk about the past tense. And this does look like it was done in the 80s or the 90s, and it's an absolutely it's fascinating. Even if you've got no interest in ever doing anything quite like this ever, if you've got any kind of interest in alternative processes at all, I urge you to watch it, because it's truly fascinating, and the guy is a master. There's no two ways about it, and he starts off by showing various different prints that he's done, and then later on he goes into some detail as to how he actually does it, and he can manipulate shadows in all sorts of different ways, and he'll lighten areas up, because generally I think the actual print comes out very dark, and then you have to work on anything you want to brighten up. I think that's the general way, but he would say like a good size print, maybe like 16-inch print, something like that, would take him a day to do it, and you could see why. And you would certainly have to have an artistic ability to be able to do it this justice.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of good resources. One that I use quite a lot for all things alternative in the photographic world, that is. Alternativephotography.com, www.alternativephotography.com. And they certainly have articles on making Bromoil prints. And then, if you really get into it, you can probably apply for membership of the Bromoil Circle of Great Britain. And they have a website called the Bromoil Circle of Great Britain.com. It's even more cumbersome than ours. Yeah.
Okay, so
we expect great things from you then.
Well, no, not from me, but there is one chap in our group that has done it before. As a child at school.
Goodness me!
And
really?
I don't think I mind me saying this. That was a while ago. I think he really fancies it, giving this another go, and I'll be fascinated to see him do it. So that's quite exciting, really.
Well, I'll find a date. It's going to be in the new year now, and I'll specifically, on my way up to the northwest where my operational base is, I'll plan to be up there on a Wednesday, and I'll stay over
Tuesday.
Yeah, I know, but I'll stay over somewhere Tuesday night. You see, so I don't have. So I'll stay somewhere locally, in your bedroom or something. Suddenly.
Sure, we can find something for you.
No, I'll stay locally. It's fine, and I'll do a lith printing demonstration. I'm by no means an expert, but I know enough to get a decent lith print. So happy to do that. That would be great fun.
No, that'd be great, and we can probably sell tickets if people know that you're coming as well, couldn't we?
Yeah, steady on.
Okay, and then one more thing that I picked up was my friend who has a stand there, Andy Cottrell. He came up to me and goes, "Do you want one of these?" And he just dropped into my hand something I've been looking for 2 years. It's a Petru lens, but a particular one. But it's not large format, so I'm not going to go into that one. But I also picked up something else from him, and that's a Patterson Orbital print developer thingy. But without the motor. This is one of these things that can be automated, and
but it's got a little round
thing on it,
hemisphere underneath, so you can rock it around, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I've heard of these things, but it's only vaguely in my head, and I think these are meant to be quite good, but I'm not entirely sure what you do with it. But I looked at it and was thinking, can you do sheet film with this?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
and you've got you should have a way of filling it on the top, which is effectively a light trap.
That's exactly, and so as soon as I got it home, I went onto YouTube, and there's a couple of videos on there showing exactly how to very easily modify it for use with 4x5 or 7x5 or 10x8. So
I think the modern day alternative is our friends in a Stearman Press, who make the SP445 tank, are very close to finalising. I don't think it was a Kickstarter. It was some kind of funded thing, or where he took pre-orders for a modern day tray processor that is you can adapt it for numerous film sizes by moving the little dividers inside. So if you haven't been following the development of the Stearman Press sheet developing tray daylight filling tank thingy bob, go and Google Stearman Press and you'll see the latest where he's up to on the development of that particular product. But that looks good. I think it's going to retail for about £100 or so.
Well, I've got a question for you. If I do use this, I mean, one, it's got an advantage that I believe I can probably do 4 sheets and about 200 ml of chemicals, which is very appealing to me. In fact, it might encourage me just to do a single sheet for that. But it's constant agitation, and I'm just wondering how you actually work out your development times. Was that considerably speeds things up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll move on now.
Well, it's like anything, I suppose. I think, well, yes, I think that if you're certainly the app on your phone, the darkroom,
massive dev.
That's it. Yeah, I'm sure they give times for both constant agitation, or maybe the film. If you're using FP4 and you go onto the Ilford certainly would give guidelines for constant agitation as opposed to intermittent.
Well, actually, that's what you got. The mod? Oh, I forget what number it is. Mod and a number. Those tubes and
54.
things. Oh, is that something else? Actually, it's those tubes. I think doesn't matter.
BZT, BZT, or BTZ tubes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the principle's just the same in terms of constant agitation, isn't it? So
yeah. So to be honest, mate, you need to practice it. You just need to experiment, don't you? So if the times for FP4 and you were using ID11 1+1, I mean, you look up the times, it might say something like 12 minutes or something. But I mean, I tend to use 8 minutes, but that's with intermittent agitation. You might find you're down at 7 or something, but just practice on something that you're not too precious with. And if it produces a negative which has got highlights where you want them, and and you can print on grade 2 to 3, you're probably in the right ballpark, aren't you? If you find that you've got a really dense negative due to excessive development, then cut the development down.
Well, I've certainly got enough FP4 now to trial it, haven't I? So yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Well,
emails. Did you want to do these emails quickly?
Yeah. No, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say that's it for my tales. So we have 3 emails, don't we? I believe
we do. Yes.
Yes. Let's go then. Let's do that then.
So we received the first email from our good friend who's emailed us before, Joachim Gross. Don't snigger every time I say his name. I'll make you pronounce it.
I was going to say, just for the sake of our listeners, this is actually our second attempt at reading this email out. Because we just had a technical problem and Andrew disappeared somewhere. And I've got to say, Andrew, I think you did a better job of pronouncing his name first time round.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah. So
anyway,
like that.
Mr. Gross says, hello again, dear Simon and Andrew, as you were wondering about the wooden tripod. So listeners of maybe the last show or the one before, we commenting on Joachim's lovely wooden tripod. And he shows a photograph of it, and more importantly, tells us where we can all rush out and buy one. So there's a company in Germany called Bellbach, and I'll put the links in the show notes to that if you want to go and buy yourself a lovely wooden tripod. He has his pictured sitting with his Sinar F2, lovely heavy Sinar F2. And he says it's about the same weight as a Gitzo tripod, of the same height, sturdiness, and so on. I guess it might be the same weight as an aluminium Gitzo. Am I saying that right? Or is it Gitzo? Yeah, anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
In my head, I've always said Gitzo, so I stand corrected if not. So I guess it's, so it's not a light thing. But then the Sinar P2, it's not, you you got to work hard for your photos. That's it's a bit of a beast, really.
It's got a lot of knobs and dials on it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's a step up from the F iterations, because the front and rear standards become these really heavy metal standards with lots of geared movements and very precise, clever markings on them. Great cameras, but anyway, he sends his regards from Germany. Thank you very much, sir. We'll share that with the rest of our listeners. And then, I enjoyed this email. This is from Ian Turpin, who I think I heard an email being read out on one of Sunny 16's backing papers just recently.
I think you're absolutely correct.
And he says, proper panoramic. That's the title of the email. Hiya, I just heard you, Simon, go on about your Horizon camera recently. And I wondered if you wanted to put some big boy pants on and try medium format panoramic. There's a challenge. I have a Tomiyama Art Pano 170, which is a 6x17 panoramic camera with a 90mm Schneider Kreuznach. Have I said that right?
I think the good idea on that one is just don't say the second part of it.
Anyway, stuck a 90mm lens on. You get 4 exposures per roll of 120. You see. Yep, you do. And it's stupidly easy to screw up. I don't shoot large format unless you count this camera, but thoroughly enjoy the podcast. If you want to borrow it for a while, you're more than welcome. I'll even throw in a couple of rolls of unexpired. Oh, Simon doesn't know how to shoot unexpired film, which might sound generous, but it is only 12 exposures less what you screw up, but he says it in a different way. I think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts and also see the results. Would be great for your light painting.
Oh, yes.
You can explain that in a minute. Why not take on too much at once? Strange, squiggly face. I'm in Northwich, which is now I know Northwich because isn't there some? Don't they do things with salt there? And some there's a salt factory or processing plant.
Middlewich.
Oh yeah, well that's close enough.
Well, it's not far. It's between one witch and another.
There you go. Yeah. That'd be the third nipple then.
On to Scaramanga now.
Yeah, which is relatively close to the city of Stoke-on-Trent. Well, maybe.
Yeah,
and now,
it's not too far. It's just down the M6, really. So.
And now term has finished for me. Next Tuesday is the last week. I was thinking I might come along to your darkroom thingy and say hello and fetch it along. Excellent. I'm not excluding you, Andrew. Well, it sounds like you are, to be honest. But I don't know where you are in the world. What do you mean? Everyone knows where I am. What's wrong with you?
In the Fens.
I'm in the Fens in Warboys in Cambridgeshire. It's not really a postable camera, and it's stupidly heavy. But if you're close, the offer still stands for either of you. You could have a competition. Well, hold that thought. Do panoramic street photography and get Graham and Perry to judge. Squiggly smiley face. Seriously, I would pay cash for this. Love both the Classic Lenses podcast and the Large Format podcast, even though I don't shoot large format and have no real interest in classic lenses. It's the personalities. Yes, I agree. Well, I shoot 6x17 on my large format camera. Simon knows when we tried to use it for double exposure challenge, didn't we?
That was for the large format. No, that's us. the negative positives film photography podcast with Andre and Mike.
Yeah, I tried putting a roll of 35mm film in that back and shooting it wouldn't be 6x17, would it? But anyway, whatever 17 centimeters is in. Yeah, well, it is 17. Yeah. Oh, dear. It's getting late now, isn't it?
Or 170 millimeters.
Anyway, it would have been a long strip of 35mm film. So basically, I also have 6x17 access to a 6x17 image size. So yeah, if you want to take it along and join Simon one night at the Six Hands Darkroom and take your 6x17 camera, we'll see if Simon can come up with any more beautiful images than I do.
I think wasn't I meant to invite him down?
Oh, I don't know.
But I'm just going to say, not that it's almost sounding like, well, perhaps I don't want Ian to come. No, I do want you to come. Please do, and do bring it with you. That sounds very, very interesting. So come down on a Tuesday night, anything from 7 o'clock onwards, and if you get in touch with me directly, I can give you some directions and things that you might want to know. But yeah, I'd love to have a go at that. It sounds really, really interesting, and panoramas are something I'm getting quite into. Although that's the thing about the horizon. I'm not too sure what the angle is going to be, the angle of view, because that's the thing I particularly like about the horizon is that I think is it 120 degrees?
It is, yeah. You won't get that much in the with a 90mm lens on. I tend to use mine. Do I use 90? No, I tend to use my standard lens on my 6x17 back. I prefer the look of the standard 150mm lens with the 617 back. And if I use my 90, I struggle a bit more. It gets getting a wider angle of view then, but it's not 120. But I like the idea of setting up the tripod with a large format camera and a 6x17 back and doing street photography. That sounds awesome, doesn't it?
I'm just thinking now about the size of actually printing that. I'm not going to be able to. Ooh.
No, you won't. 6x12. Oh, actually, you might be able to with your 6x
with a
5x7.
Yeah, it might just do it.
You'll be able to. I can only go up to 6x12.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
So I have made contact prints with 6x17 negatives, and they're very nice.
Well, the other thing is we've got a roll of film. It's 5 inches tall, if you like, but goes on forever. So that'd be perfect for printing. Oh yeah, that sounds really, really good, Ian.
Anyway, Ian, get yourself along. That sounds wonderful. And don't worry about me. You just favour Simon. But you can happily send me film, though. I'm always up for that.
One thing I was going to say, I mean, do come down any Tuesday you like, but I think it might be a good idea to do it once we've got the printer there, because we will be able to print one of your shots.
Do you mean enlarger?
Enlarger, yeah. So we will be able to do that when we get the 7x5.
Do you know when Mr. Segersby, when is he delivering it to you? Have you got to go and pick it up?
We've not quite worked that one out yet,
right.
But he's a busy old chap, as you know, not that he's old, but he's busy, and he's just getting the time for him to just get everything together. But it's moving in the right direction, and that's the main thing. Really looking forward to that. So yeah, there we go. And I say come down anytime you like, Ian. And if you want to come down before it turns up, then great. And come down again after, and come and you can visit as many times as you like. Frankly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Last email then before we roll the roll VT.
Yes.
That's or whatever the expression is. So we've had an email, maybe our first email from Australia, mate.
Yeah.
He says, "Look." Because all Australians start their sentence by the word "look." Look. No, he doesn't. He says hello. Yeah. I'm really enjoying the podcast and often listen while driving. So just one. Okay, that's about it.
Let's finish that one right now. Yeah.
You don't want me to do any? Do you not like dodgy, stereotype accents?
Simon? I think it's. Yeah, I do think. Yeah, keep leave the accents away. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, hello. I'm really enjoying the podcast and often listen while driving. So just wondering if you wouldn't mind making a small addition to notes on each episode. In addition to the websites, etc., please consider including a listing of any books you discuss or even mention. It would be really helpful, at least for me, because while driving, I can't easily make a note of them. When I thought I certainly have made reference to some books, but maybe I've missed some.
Well, I'm just wondering if Peter's actually viewing. So I think some of the notes. Well, I mean, I think if on your podcast app, sometimes you can get a lot of the notes appear on that. I think, I don't know. That's not the way that I listen to them, so I couldn't say. But certainly, if you go to where the podcast is hosted, which is on Podbean. I mean, it's no use putting a link in there if you can't see it. But if you do a search for Podbean, and then on Podbean, do a search for large format photography podcast, you will find our page on there, and you will find Andrew's copious notes.
Sorry, finish that sentence.
No.
When I share the link to when you put the podcast out, it tends to be me who then shares it into the Facebook group, and all I do is I go onto Podbean and share the link directly from there, and that transfers the show notes in to Facebook. And sometimes as well, I haven't done it recently, I've actually cut and paste the Word document into the group as well.
It could be that Peter's not on Facebook, because there are quite a number of people who just won't go anywhere near it. So
that's true.
So, but that would be if that is the case, and you're not seeing the notes on Facebook, and you can find them on Podbean, and Andrew does a great job with the notes.
If I mention a book, I try and make a note of it and put it in, but there may be, and I do apologise if I've missed some. I apologise, Peter, but if you can remember, I suppose if you eventually listen to the podcast, you'll know what they are, won't you? But anyway, so I take it on board, Peter, and I'll try and make sure that I record the details of books we mentioned. We haven't mentioned any this week, have we?
Yes, you have mentioned a book, actually.
Have I?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Oh yes, the liquid emulsion book.
That was it.
Yep. So I've got a note to do that when I do the show notes on Friday when I'm back home.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think that's it for this part of the show.
Goodness me, feels like we've been talking 2 hours and it's just us two.
Yeah. We will be back in 2 weeks with another guest. So you've got John Boyce to look forward to now. Please do listen to that. It's an excellent listen. So from this part of the podcast, or at least me, because you've got quite a bit of Andrew still to come. So I'll say goodbye, and I'll hand over to Andrew to just finish this little section and introduce the last part of the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Well, I think we covered most of it earlier on, but we've got about an hour now just listening to me chat with John Boyce, and John is Mr. Devere. That's all we can really say. And so we've already covered the dodgy recording and my lack of recording skills. But there we go. So please enjoy, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm here with John Boyce of Odyssey De Vere. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
So we're going to talk to John a little bit about his life with Odyssey De Vere and how he came into that, and what he does now, what keeps him busy, how come people are still using photographic enlargers, and but I'm actually here to pick up my Devere 504, which has had a bit of a birthday. What have you done to my 504, John?
What have I done to it? I've cleaned it.
Yeah.
I've given it the once over in all mechanical areas and electrical. I've adjusted every part that needed adjusting. I've replaced a couple of things that needed replacing, which were screws that were broken off on the tightening of the on focusing and negative movements of the machine, and lined it up, which is always a quite important factor with negative and wet printing.
Actually, before we get into the formal stuff of sort of introducing you and talking about your background, that whole area of setting up enlargers, it's an area that I think, as I talk to folks online, maybe if they've just bought their enlarger, particularly if it's second hand, they won't know much about setting up. But
They certainly won't. No.
So maybe a few tips on what people, just general tips, not necessarily to do with Odyssey in De Vere enlargers, but with general enlarging. Some tips perhaps from you, John, from your years of experience?
Well, don't get too excited about lining up. Remember that the lens is the one thing that, if it's out of line, will give you the worst results in focus on your print, because a small movement of the lens will actually cause a large amount of out of focus from centre to edges. Also, remember to use the correct focal length of lens for the negative that you're actually using, i.e. a 50mm lens for a 35mm neg and a 150mm lens for a 4x5. Because everybody thinks they can scrimp on lenses and get bigger sizes out of their enlarger than they should do. But if you use the wrong focal length of lens, then it won't work properly. Lining up, there's lots of devices in the past that have been available with into lasers and optical. Use a spirit level. That's use a spirit level on the negative plane. Both ways and on the negative plane. That is the major thing to do. The baseboard is important, but it's nowhere near as important as getting your negative and your lens at areas lined up.
So I think when I've done this before, if I've got a small spirit level,
Yep.
and I've tried to get it into the negative plane area,
Yep.
and then I've moved it down onto the baseboard, and generally if I've got, whether the baseboard's sort of physically level or not, as long as it's parallel with the negative area, I'm guessing both planes.
If your
90 degrees.
baseboard, your negative plane and your lens plane are in line, it doesn't matter with the enlargers cocked over at 45 degrees. No. It will still be sharp when you print.
Would there be some enlargers that, I mean, could they have faults inside them, which means that they're not sitting square, or is it just sort of set?
They can have problems inside with adjustments and where various bits of the enlarger are screwed together. But just concentrate on the negative and the lens plane of the enlarger to get those lined up, and everything else should fall into place. If you take a Devere, for instance, they're lined up and there are centre clicks at where we put movements for correction of verticals and horizontals when using 5.4 cameras and trying to get your verticals. We put adjustments on the enlarger to be able to move the negative plane and the lens plane to do vertical correction.
Have I got that on mine?
You've got it, and you've got it on yours. Yeah. Before you leave, I'll show you.
Show me how to do that.
I'll show you how to do it. Yeah. But there's a centre click that with a little spring, a little ball, and a little that when we finally line them up in the factory, that was all put in there. So you can do the movements. You can always buy a manual from us that'll show you how to do it.
Yeah, I've seen that manual. I didn't understand it. I think I'll just find it easier to bring it to you. So I think my poor old enlarger. We'll take a pause there.
Yeah. I'll show you I'll show you that what I'm talking about.
Okay. Well, I think we'll assume
and how to line it up if you want to.
Excellent. I won't stop the recording in case I lose anything. So hopefully we've got all that. If we find we haven't got all that preamble, I'll make it up when we do the podcast.
You get the background. Yeah.
So John, anyway, it's lovely to be here, and thanks for the tea and the chat. So why don't we just start by in my mind, John Boyce, I first contact with you a few years ago, I think after I'd got my Devere 504, just for some help with a fan that was broken and things like that. But I've been familiar with Devere and Odyssey De Vere from old adverts in Amateur Photographer, in Darkroom User and Camera and Darkroom User magazines.
Well, it would have been Devere, and then from 92 onwards it had been Odyssey De Vere.
Okay, well, why don't you start by, I think you and Devere and Odyssey are intrinsically linked in my mind.
We are. Yeah.
So why don't you take some time and please be as forthcoming as you need to be. We're not pressed on time, and talk to us about your background, how you came to be associated with this business, and bring us up to where we are now, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you're doing these days.
Okay. Well, when I was at school, I wanted to be, or to leave school, I wanted to be an engineer. As usual in those days, we were put into streams, like an English or a mechanical stream, and I was put in an English stream. But I saw this workshop at the bottom of the school playground, and I wanted much more to be in there than I did to be sitting there learning English language and English literature, which I passed my GCEs in, but didn't take anything mechanical. But I used to go and play in the workshop. So when I left school and all the other things that are going on, I remember I wanted to be an engineer. And I then spoke to my mother and various people of where I might go, and I went to 3 companies. One I know was called Small Electrical Engineering, and another one was called Devere, which had a very small workshop in Penge, South London. And my auntie knew via a church, I think, the boss of the company. So she said, "Why don't you go and have a chat down there?" So I went down there and had a chat, and it was amazing at those days to be an apprentice. There was plenty of opportunity, and I went to the 3 companies, and each of the companies offered me a job as an apprentice engineer. And I thought about it, and I thought it's probably better to go to a little company, and I might progress more in a little company than I would in a big company.
Sure.
And also with a bit of family connection, not a lot, but a little bit, I decided to take the offer from Devere, of which I started as a pure mechanical engineer, doing my apprenticeship, my 5-year apprenticeship, to land up to be a scientific instrument maker. They were called indentures at that time, and so I started there. I started to enjoy it, and I absolutely totally remember being taken into the workshop, shown around the workshop, and shown a bench, and on that bench was a line of, I remember, 12 54 enlargers, and I was given a job with a little paintbrush to paint black paint inside the bellows of a 54 enlarger, and that was the first job. And to be perfectly frank, in the last 60 years that I haven't done anything different. I'm still painting inside bellows of now 504 enlarger rather than a 54 enlarger. But there's been a lot of water under the bridge in that time. I realised after a short period of time of working machines and getting dirty with cast iron and those, I really didn't want to spend my life in a factory. Fortunately, it was a small company. It was very flexible. I got on well with the governor, and after a year, a couple of times I was asked, well, I could go out and fix things outside, which I said I would, as I had a motorbike, and I was sent off to various places, first of all with other people, to fix machines out in London that needed fixing, so in the end, before my 5 years was up, I was spending 50% of my time travelling around doing service work, and the other 50% in the factory making enlargers.
So this small engineering company you started working with was called Devere?
Devere, yeah. Devere Kensington Limited. It was
Devere Kensington. That's very posh, isn't it?
It was. Yeah.
And did they just make enlargers, or were they making other instruments as well?
No, they just made enlargers. If you've got the time, I'll just give you a slight background on that.
Okay.
That the old Governor Arthur Sparks, he was an engineer who did a lot of war work, and he met a photographer. The photographer, and Arthur Sparks started a very small engineering company in Penge, in Peckham, and this photographer asked him to make him a dishwarmer. So he made a dishwarmer, and then the photographer said, "Oh, could you? Well, what's the next thing? Oh, could you maybe make a 5.4 camera?" And he said he could. However, he made this 5.4 camera, and they were sitting in the guy's studio, which was in Kensington High Street, on the corner of Kensington High Street and Devere Gardens. and they said we should start a little company making photographic gear. So they agreed to do this as a partnership with the photographer doing the selling and Arthur Sparks making the stuff. And they looked around and said, what are we going to call the company? And they said, well, Devere sounds like a posh name. So they called it. They had to call it Devere Kensington Limited because there was a Devere, a diamond company named Devere.
And a hotel chain, I think, these days.
And a hotel chain. And Devere, the first Devere hotel was in Devere Gardens in 5 Kensington High Street. That's where they were sitting.
So what year, if you don't mind?
It goes back. I can't actually remember the first year.
Was it after the war?
It was just after the war, and in a minute I'll find it. Okay,
Yes,
the actual date. Which
John's got a folder here with pretty much the history of Odyssey De Vere.
In it. Yeah, I'll find the. But just after the war. That they get together, and then they started a factory in it was in Peckham, and that went on, and in the end had a little foundry. So they did a cradle to grave operation of actually casting the did electrical work, mechanical work, did the painting, did everything. On
my Devere 504, it's got this cast. What they call a column.
Column.
Would that have been made?
That would have been
in-house?
made by Devere at our own foundry. Yeah, that was. But that was in Devon by then when that one was made.
Right.
As things progressed on, obviously the camera went into enlarger, and I carried on making cameras, and the main product though was enlargers that they made. The factory then went to ex-WD buildings in Penge, which were being let out very cheaply to carry on the after the war effect, the engineering, etc. And that really did then turn into an enlarger factory. Not a lot of cameras were made, but they were still made, and that's when I started in whenever it was. Let me just think of the
Careful,
year.
you'll be dating yourself now.
I will. 52 at 58. It was just about, let's say 60, shall we? At 1960. When I started as an apprentice engineer, then in basic enlargers, and we just have one small area making 5, 4, and 8 by 10 and 7 by 5. Half plate it was that time.
So were the
monorail cameras? Yeah.
Okay, so was the you said it was 5.4. Was that the name used for the camera and the early enlargers?
No, we at 54 was 54. Was enlarger because it did a 5. Well, it actually did half plate, and there's a little story behind that.
They're quite similar, aren't they? I forget the sizes. Half plate.
6.5, 4 3/4 is half plate, and 4x5 is 4x5.
Yes.
So just a little bit bigger at. Half plate was made because purchase tax was charged on anything under 4x5 in the photographic industry, and anything above 4x5 there was no purchase tax.
Really?
Yeah. So the 54 or the 54 was made as a half plate machine, so that purchase tax wasn't charged on it.
A bit of creative accountancy and tax avoiding.
That's it, exactly. But no, it would actually just do half plate with a cathode head on it. It would actually cover a half plate size, but it was made for 4x5, really not and 2 1/4 square. 35 wasn't that sort of big in those days.
So a 5x7 enlarger.
You want quarter plate and half plate, whole plate were the actual sizes which became 4x5, 7x5, and 8x10 as things moved on.
So a 5x7 enlarger is as near as
is a half plate
camera,
and 1318 is the continental size, and that is still a different size from 7x5 and half plate, and it's we
won't have to worry about that soon. Once we leave the European Union, we can just go back to feet and inches.
Yeah, we can do, can't we? But however, that was the progress on of De Vere. And after I started, so before 5 years, I was in, well before 5 years, I wasn't working in the factory.
Sorry, where was the factory at this point?
It was in
Penge?
a place called Thayers Farm Road in Penge.
Okay.
In Penge and Beckenham border.
Yep.
That's, which is still South London.
Yes. And how many enlargers do you think would have been sold in a year in those days?
In a year, then, well, I wasn't sort of privy to the figures at that time.
Excuse me.
But I know we produced, let me see, it was 20. There would be, in a month, there would be about 50 to 80 enlargers a month at that time coming out, of different sizes.
Yeah.
4x5, and the 4x5 was the smallest that we made. 7x5 and 8x10, a whole plate. That were the sizes. And I'd say a couple of dozen cameras. There wasn't a lot, but that was increasing fairly rapidly.
And in terms of the illumination on the enlargers at that time, what was the sort of illumination?
The main illumination was cold cathode.
Now, tell us a little bit about cold cathode, because my co-host Simon has just been given a 5x7 enlarger, and it's got, I think I showed you a picture of it last time I was here, and it's got the cold cathode head, but it's also got a condenser head, as well.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of Simon and anyone else who's listening, explain a bit about those.
It's a granny soft printing light to get rid of the wrinkles. That's that's how we always used to
Which
describe
one?
it.
Cold cathode?
Cold cathode, yeah. It's a fairly soft blue actinic light, but a very good black and white printing light, because the tubes, the fluorescing tubes, were actually coated with a blue actinic coating,
which is the wavelength at which the traditional papers would have been sensitive
correct.
to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's very good printing light, but it's a bit soft. But worked very well. Once the tubes were operating, I still got tubes that fired up after 40 years.
If you've got scratch negatives, I've no idea whether Simon scratches his negatives or not. Does that? I know a colour head, a diffuser colour head,
softens it down. It softens the scratches.
And I always tell people after I went on a Larry Bartlett printing course to use a bit of nose grease.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Onto the non-emulsion side of the negative. That helps.
Yeah, there you go. One way of doing it, isn't it? Yeah. And like sticking it on the lens.
So if you've got
soft focus,
would Simon be advised to use his cold cathode head now, do you think, or should he stick with his condenser head?
If he develops his negatives or produces negatives to actually work with the cold cathode,
so maybe a slightly higher contrast, so fully developed negatives.
Fully developed negs, then the cathode light would be very good. But you've got to match it. So, but if you do have scratch negatives and things like that, then the cathode light is the one to use. It does fill in the edges.
There you go, Simon. So you can, for your rubbish negatives, you've got the perfect enlarger.
You've got an excuse now, haven't you? And then, of course, there's condenser light source, which we call the soot and whitewash light source, which will show up every scratch and things like that. Which you can put diffusers into the drawer of
you could make a homemade diffuser, couldn't you? I think I've done that before.
Just a small bit of
just make sure it doesn't catch fire.
The small perspex, and there, and it's in the filter drawer of a condenser light source.
And then you can use the Ilford under the lens filters, couldn't you?
Yeah,
which are quite good anyway.
And that was the progress. And then we came on to diffused tungsten halogen at light sources, and then we came on to using filters with those for colour printing. And we used to use you might remember the AGFA dial-in at colour head.
I'm shaking my head now. I'm clearly far too young.
You could. That was made by AGFA, and we used to stick that on top of a condenser light source with a diffuser in it, to project colour through. Durst, I have to say, which our major competitor in the professional market, came out with a soft light colour head using Rattan filters, but in a wheel. And a progressing wheel.
So the colour head, apart from having the magenta yellow and
cyan magenta yellow,
cyan
that one,
filters in. You've got, this is effectively my dichromat head.
Yes.
So you've got your tungsten light, and it shines into a a big soft white box, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's soft into, but then in between came what we call dichroic filters, which were dyed in the mass glass in the cyan, magenta, yellow colours.
Is that what that stands for?
Yeah, dichroic, and that's where it says dyed in the mass. And these were, I actually don't know who invented it, but dichroic filters are used sort of everywhere. They are put into a centrifuge and dyed with this and really spun at amazing speed, and they really are dyed in the mass, and they really don't fade. They get dirty.
As mine were.
Yeah, they get dirty, and it's but you clean them up, and they up they come. But they really are virtually permanent colours. So that really then put colour photography from enlargers really go a great spurt. With the dichroic colour light sources, which is then shining a what we call a multifaceted bowl, which then focuses about an inch ahead of the bowl, and that's where you put the filters. So the maximum amount of light goes through the filter, which then goes into through a small hole in a box, which is what we call a soft box. It's basically made of ceiling tiles.
Yes, I noticed when I had mine apart.
With all the experiment and all the stuff that's gone on in the world over the last umpteen years.
It's not asbestos, though.
It's not asbestos. We've come up with the
relieved.
It is absolutely standard ceiling tiles, cut to shape and all this sort of thing. But because they've got all the little ripples in them, they mix. That's what they do, is they mix. It bounces all around in that box, mixing all the colours together with a piece of perspex at the bottom, which then gives an even light over over there. We came up with an idea that the perspex in the bottom, which is a white perspex, we machined it so it was thicker in the middle than the edges, so that because obviously, as you know, a light projecting down, you're going to get the distance from your lens to the outside of your print to the centre is more, so you're going to get less light at the edges. So we machined the actual perspex in the bottom of these light boxes, so it's thicker in the middle and less at the edges, so you've got less light through the middle and more light through the edges. Okay. You didn't know that? Not a lot of people do.
No. Well, I'm going to just stop you there and get you to retell, if you don't mind, a funny story. Well, I thought it was a great story about a very well-known photographer who you had the pleasure of visiting recently. And he'd been, unbeknown to him, he'd been using his larger in, let we say, a suboptimal way for many years.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so we won't name him, right? But he's very well known.
But he's a very famous photographer. Who's and he had did he have his condensers in the wrong place or something?
He had the wrong condensers in his condenser head, but for the wrong size of negative there. So
yes, because you can move them now. I had a Kaiser enlarger. You could move your condensers up and down, depending on whether you're shooting through medium format or 35mm. Is that right?
Yeah, you've got normally set from 4x5 to 35mm.
Right.
You've got 4 condensers, which is two to cover 4x5, and then you change one to cover medium format, and then you change 2 to cover 35mm.
And he had his on the. He was trying to print medium format. He was trying to
print 35mm with his medium format condensers, and the lens did not really match. So he was doing rather a lot of dodging. So now he doesn't have to do quite as much dodging as he
but what about when he comes to remake some of his lovely prints again, using his notes, if he keeps notes?
I think he's just a pure natural photographer come printer.
I think so, yeah. I suspect knowing who it is, he won't have too much trouble.
No, he won't have too much trouble. He's been doing it for a couple of years, so it's...
So just take you back to that enlarger that my friend Simon has got, his 5x7, that has... he can move it. Is it obvious where he has to put his... If
he lifts up the lid of his head, he'll find a little chart underneath which tells you what condensers to use for what neck sizes and what lens, focal length of lens, it's all there.
So if he uses that head and gets a little bit of perspex perhaps in the filter drawer, and then uses Ilford under the lens filters. That's probably, unless he wants certain whitewash, scratchy.
If he wants proper black and white, and if he's doing any print and stuff like that, then you shouldn't have any diffuser in there.
Because I use my Mark III head. We'll talk about the different designs in a moment. I use that purely for black and white, with combinations of yellow and magenta filters in. And the perceived wisdom out there is that you probably don't get quite the maximum density of black. We're using a colour head setup. You don't get quite grade 5, maybe. I don't know. Is that what's your experience with that?
Well, if you come to a company named Odyssey De Vere and you really want to do it properly, they can take out the cyan filters in your colour head and put in magenta, which doubles at the top end, the grade of the which we have done once or twice for people.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, but it's very fine.
I can't say as I've settled on a system now where I'm developing my negatives. So generally, I'm printing on grade 2.5.
2.5. You're halfway.
And that's normal.
That's normal. It's only really you've got to, if you want effects or you've got negatives that need adjusting. Do you need to adjust that? 2.5 is the normal. It's a grade, and that's what papers are made for as well. You module grade paper. Really.
So, there's a new multi-grade, of course, that's been released now. We'll perhaps
you find out, won't you?
Find out later. So where did we get to then? So we were introducing.
We were introducing colour heads, and then dichroic filters were coming in.
Are we talking 70s now?
We're talking 70s, We're talking end of 70s, and then the 80s. The beginning of the 80s really got going, and Devere then wanted to expand. And there were lots of Maggie Thatcher was at that time was giving out lots of grants to get manufacturing into where they needed more employment. So we started a factory in Barnstable in North Devon. That's one thing that my old governor had his honeymoon down then.
Is that Mr.
there.
Sparks still?
Sparks, Sparks had his honeymoon down there, liked the area, and one of the areas that they were offering a lot of grants for, and rates free, and grants for how many people you employed and things like this there. So we started a factory down there, but still kept the factory in South London, and he moved down there with his son, and I stayed. I was then the director of the company, and I then stayed in the London area looking after that.
What was your role then? So you were.
I was sales director. I was a sales director at that time.
So what was a working week for you like in those days?
Pretty busy.
Yeah. Were you out most days?
I was no, I was in, but then I was travelling the world. And travelling once a month backwards and forwards to Barnstable. That's down there, maybe sometimes more. Because the managing director was there. They would come up occasionally, but less and less in the later years, and left me doing it up in London, and so we were setting up agencies all around the world.
Is that how you worked? You had agents in different countries?
We had agents in different countries, America started to get big, so we started our own company in America. And that's why I said we had a house on the East Coast, a house on the West Coast, so that when I travelled backwards and forwards, there was someone to
somewhere
live.
Comfortable to stay,
and our managers stayed in the houses, and we had separate flats in the in the basement. And I did once a month. But
San Francisco, was it on one?
No, it was Los Angeles. We had a Hermosa Beach. We had 7 miles south of the Los Angeles airport, and Columbia, Maryland, which was near Baltimore. And I used to commute to Baltimore once a month, week out there and back again. I thought it was great. I loved it. That's,
I can imagine.
I wouldn't want to do it now. But and then twice a year I travel the world, one the north, one the south route, going around, setting up agencies, visiting people.
For a lot of our listeners are from the USA, probably over 50%, and when they're using large format enlargers, there are some names that crop up more frequently. Devere, not so much.
Not so much. We were known as the big we were the giant enlargers, because we were well known in the States for horizontal enlargers.
Okay.
There was Amiga,
Well, I sort of think
Bezier, and all these sort of people on the 4x5s.
Yeah, Amiga,
so
I think
cheap
Amiga
prices,
and Bezier,
you know.
are they both American makes?
They're both American.
Yeah, they're the ones
So
that I see mentioned
you
in
would know
forums.
those, and
Yeah.
that's one. They made thousands and tens of thousands
So
of
that's why they're
those
still
machines.
out there on the second-hand
But we
market.
we were specialising in horizontal enlargers, particularly at that time a condenser horizontal enlarger.
That's the sort of thing I've seen Ansel Adams in a video, and he's projecting onto a wall,
Onto the wall,
and he's
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of dancing in front of it with his hands,
and doing it all. That's,
Yeah.
well, the one that's doing it, still doing it at the moment, is in France, and I'll never remember the name. It's Senior Moments now.
I'm probably familiar with.
I'll think of him. That bought one about 10 years ago from me, a horizontal, and doing all that sort of stuff and chucking things at it, and it's the picture.
There's an American
yeah.
who photographs in the Everglades called Clyde Butcher. He's getting
Yes,
on a bit
I know
now.
that name. Yeah.
And I think he's making wall projected prints, because I saw a video recently, and he's got the prints. In order to develop them, you make these big trays, and you just have 2 or 3 people
Yeah.
with a red light on. You're just sort of moving it back through the trays, and then you roll it up and take it to the next stage.
Exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, we became well known for the horizontal enlarger and sold a lot of horizontal enlargers there, because just normal commercial work, normal exhibition decoration.
Because there'd be no other way, really, would there?
Yeah,
Make big prints.
and you think you probably have heard in the past of CPL, Colour Processing Labs, which is our biggest one in the UK. But they had 6 of them down in Edenbridge, in their
it's
dark
amazing,
rooms.
isn't it?
And that's what we got known for in the States, and did a lot of work out there, a lot of selling. And we used to do all the exhibitions around Las Vegas. The one so I've been to Las Vegas 25 times, I think, doing a show. There, and that's where we basically sold our equipment at big exhibitions.
Big exhibition, yeah. Okay, so we'll resume the recording. I don't quite know where we got to, because I'm using Neil Piper's recording device, and I don't quite frankly know how to use it properly. So I'm guessing Simon might have to do a little bit of editing here, but I think we're probably getting up to the 1980s, and maybe where the squeeze started, and maybe the business got into a bit of a decline, and we saw some name changes and new investors. So maybe, John, you want to pick up somewhere around there?
Late 80s, the digital started to. I have a little background as well. In the beginning of the 80s, my old sales manager, we were at an exhibition, and he said there was a bit of an increase in video, and he said to me, he says, "Watch that," he said, "he's going to take us over in the end." And I told him, "Don't be so bloody stupid." I said, "Look, photography is not going to go away." However, by the end of the 80s, digital was starting to make a very large impact, and if we hadn't progressed into the digital age, things were getting very tight. And the problem for Devere was that we were, as I mentioned before, a cradle-to-grave operation. We did it all ourselves, which was becoming a big rock round our neck. We needed to slim down, and we needed to what we actually call subcontract, where we could turn a switch to turn the manufacturing on and off. But when you're doing it all yourself, it is very difficult to do that. And the position I was in, and have been there for a long time, and all the people that we work with have been there a long time, they are all my mates. And it became very difficult to slim down and to get rid or ask my mates to leave. So the company, and I will admit this, was quite slow in slimming down to meet the digital age.
Well, you've got there's a human element to it, isn't there? Because people have got their livelihoods and their families, and you knew a lot of them.
And it was very difficult. However, I was asked whether I could get the banks who were starting to squeeze to bring somebody in to give us a hand, which I agreed to because, to be perfectly frank, I was an engineer going into a salesman, going into senior management. The financial bit sort of passed me by, because as we progressed, the finances sort of looked after themselves and were okay. But when
things start to turn,
I was not trained in that area. Although what I had done is I had purchased all our property as we've moved along and moved onwards, rather than renting. I bought everything, so that we were fairly okay in the property and the capital, but the cash was running out. So this guy, we agreed to bring him in, and going onwards, a year later, I was asked to not come in. By saying not come in, that they thought they could do a better job than I could without me, and gave me the opportunity to not to arrive at work in the morning, but be on full pay, full everything whatsoever, but just sign an agreement that I would not compete. So it took me a few seconds to think about that, but I agreed, although it was quite traumatic at the time. And I was then being paid what I'd been paid, which was at that time was reasonable, and with all the benefits, the cars and things, and but just don't come into work. My son was still employed my wife was there, but she left as well. But my son was still employed in the company.
Okay.
And so I retired, I think, for 4 weeks, and got fed up with that. And thought, what can I do? So I went to the people that were there at the time and said, what does signing that agreement not to compete mean? I said, can I sell second-hand Devere? And they said, you can do what you like within the photographic industry, just do not make new Devere enlargers. I said, that's it, can't make new Devere enlargers. Anything else I can do? Yes, you can. So I said, thank you very much. So Odyssey was formed. Odyssey being a name for boat I had.
So that was your creation.
That's
then
my
that's where
creation.
the Odyssey,
Yeah. No,
right?
Odyssey was
I do
creation.
remember that. I do
Yeah.
remember suddenly Odyssey.
Yeah.
Coming
into the because we named it that way, because Odysseus went on a journey, not quite knowing where he's going, not quite knowing where he's going to land up.
And that was you.
And that was us at the time, exactly. And we had a boat named it, so we called the company Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, long story short, going on, we did okay, selling and doing up Devere and.
So
and
what
selling
about
it.
the people who were still making?
Yeah, still
enlargers?
making it. They carried on for another year at making it. They then decided. I got a phone call from my son saying, "Dad," he said, "there's somebody sitting in your old office," he said, in the chair, he said, "that I don't recognise. I'm trying to find out who it is." He came back to me, he said, he's called a receiver. And the banks had called in the receiver. My son still worked there.
Yeah.
So they broke the company up. The property, of course, they decided to close it down and sell it off. They got their money for all the taxes and the VATs and the things like that out of the property. I became the second biggest buyer at the auction of equipment, and a German bought the actual remainder of the company because we manufactured a particular part of an enlarger for this German company. He wanted to carry on. He carried on doing part of the manufacture, kept the factory open in Devon. Odyssey became this guy's major customer in the end. He couldn't really keep it going, so I then purchased the remainder of Devere. All of Devere,
And then you
so
could call it, and then instead of just Odyssey Sales, it was Odyssey De Vere.
So then it became Odyssey De Vere. Odyssey is our family partnership company, which is my wife, myself, my two sons,
Yeah.
which have a photo lab around the corner here.
Yeah.
And James, who worked for De Vere for a long time, I'll show you a picture of it. On break off St. Les.
Yeah.
What's the photographer in Paris with
Okay,
the
don't worry.
horizontal?
I'm not going to stop it. Simon can edit it.
What's his name?
The one with the
You remember the one with the horizontal?
Kiefer.
Kiefer. Yeah,
Kiefer.
Kiefer.
From Anselm.
Ansel Cooper. That's
Okay.
it. That's
No, Anselm.
Keep rental.
yeah. That's
I'll do some Googling on
Look him
him.
up.
Very
Yeah.
strange
That's,
German.
yeah.
Well, aren't they all?
Yeah.
He's very strange.
That and so that was Odyssey. In the interim, I had I met a Chinese guy in an exhibition in New Orleans who was looking at Devere enlargers, and after a while, I realised he knew a lot more about enlargers than a normal punter, and he was asking questions with his hands. However, long story short,
Because he didn't speak English.
he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Chinese, but
yeah.
we spoke the same language with our hands, and you know, and I said, "You make enlargers," and he was looking to copy a 504. We got down to the basics of it all with him in a meeting, and I said, "Don't copy it. I'll send you one. You make it." So I sent him a 504 enlarger. 3 months later, I got this machine back, and I was absolutely astounded. It was great, you know. It was getting close to the best one that we made.
Wow. And he wasn't using casting, he was...
No, he was using casting. He did exactly the same. He had
was
a
he?
small foundry.
Right.
He had a small factory, and he did exactly the same. He was
Goodness me.
making Chinese enlargers. So I flew out there, and we made an agreement. We signed it. We made a bit of paper. Did it all. And
Was it
shook
written in
hands.
Chinese or English?
It's written in both. It was, and that he wanted the name Devere in China, and he wanted to make the equipment. So I said, okay, you make the equipment. You make it for me. That's and whatever you sell in China, you give me a percentage on. You know? That's for the name and for doing it. But you make, I'll send you the drawings. No, don't send drawing. Don't send drawing. It said me metric. It said you imperial drawing no good. You know.
Yeah, I'll just copy it.
Yeah, you send to machine, I copy. You know, and that's how it did it. And we manufactured for 12 years together. He did a great job. He improved the product. And as you've seen, what's downstairs, it's a good-looking bit of kit.
Well, Dan, when I was last here, you had I think it was going to Switzerland, you had a Mark IV desk-mounted 504.
Correct,
Lovely,
yeah.
and that was a Chinese one, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
And then downstairs now you've just assembled a 5108
Correct.
8x10 floor standing enlarger,
Yep, correct.
which is just beautiful.
Yeah, that's and I, as a manufacturer of it, I'm very impressed with it. That's and I'm writing to my friend who made it. That's he's called Devere China. He's called Changshu Devere Manufacturing Company.
Is he still going then?
He's still going. Well, he is. You see that? That's
But are you?
that's
Is your relationship
no,
with him still?
It's relationship still good, but he doesn't manufacture on a daily basis for us at all now.
So if somebody wanted a brand new, I know you can, a brand new 504 from
Yeah.
you, is that something they could still have?
A kit they could not in the moment, because I'd have to go.
Would you go to him?
Him, yes, I'd go to him to actually get it done. At the moment now, there's not enough business, so not enough demand to actually start manufacturing. There's enough machinery on the market and in my store to refurbish, to actually carry on supplying as new equipment.
So if people wanted a refurbished 504, you know, with either my head on the Mark III or the Mark IV,
Mark III, Mark IV with an Ilford head, a condenser head, they can have it. We still refurbish it. We replace anything that needs replacing on the machine. We even respray if necessary. They can look new. You know, that's they'll go on for another,
well, you've done
years.
You've done what I can see is a fine job on mine, and thank you very much for that.
That's all right, no problem. That's I've only been doing it for a couple of years. You know.
I was when I thought about, well, should I? Okay, it's a bit traumatic getting in the back of the car, but then once you showed me how to take the head off
and things,
and you can show me how to do that again in a minute when I leave.
Yeah.
So, what's your working week, or your typical? Well, I don't suppose there is a typical working week for you, but
it's not really.
What
typical.
do you do these days? You're spending some time dealing with idiots like me, and then you're with schools and stuff, aren't you? Schools and colleges.
Yeah, I work. That's because I want to work and I like working and I like getting up in the morning, and I still like seeing enlargers go out the door. I say, as an old friend saying, I say goodbye to them still. well, I don't do that, then I'll give up, you know. But as we are Devere, we're our own boss. We can do what we want. The working week depends upon the work that comes in, which is I now and again refurbish enlarger, and a lot of service work, particularly in education, universities, art colleges around the country.
Now, I think you're seeing a bit of an upsurge in that interest.
We are in wet processing, particularly in the education side. We've seen an upsurge. Talking to a university, Aberystwyth this morning, they're going into degree courses in photography. They want to get their darkroom together again.
I was here when they rang you.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're next door to the Brighton University.
You've just driven over 25 504s in a darkroom underneath the road that you've just driven down as well. Yeah, which we do an annual service twice a year here, and they've got another department just down the road with a black and white in.
And periodically, once or twice a year, you do what I could call milk runs, where you go around and do servicing.
We start in Scotland, and we do the university, like from Dundee to Edinburgh to Glasgow. Each of the universities, one or two private dark rooms and things that rent out, and we keep things running, and then we work our way down the country, like Sheffield Hallam, that's a university that we do. Manchester, go through them, Leeds, you know, but and work our way down the country.
Okay, so I've been asked by Steve Segersby, who owns one of your 5108 enlargers, floor standing, if I remember.
Correct.
I think he expressed interest in having it. I'll just say the word service, but probably, you know what you did with mine, clean, make sure nothing, get rid of the mice that were living in mine and things,
the spiders that were.
So he lives somewhere near Leeds. So if he gets in touch with you, you could perhaps fit.
I'll put him on the list, and when we're doing a run around the country, we can make arrangements to come and call on him at a much better price. Excuse me, than actually driving all the way up to Leeds and driving all the way back again. But sometimes we do Scotland, if we got an emergency thing like that, go on a plane, you know, and go up there, which happens now and again, but not often.
Most of the enlargers, if you're on these, are you visiting the same schools and colleges each year?
Yeah, most of them, but they're going to get an extra one.
I mean, they're getting kids who. I say kids, young people using these things.
Kids, yeah.
So they could get a bit of abuse, I suppose. Do they mostly need just a bit of realigning?
They need a bit of realigning, but every now and again something might break. You know, but the greasing and the old tensators and things, the counterbalances start to wear a bit and need replacing. You know, so it's. But it is what we call it a preventive maintenance annual service visit. You know, so
if people need things,
so they don't break down.
What kind of spare parts are you regularly carrying for either Devere enlargers or perhaps some things that are common in other people's enlargers?
Switches, lamp holders, those
little ceramic lamp holders. I'm staring at some there.
Things like that. You know, that's why they're there to get some more. You know, and the bits come up here, bowls for the inside.
And I bought an enlarger lens from you. Are you still dealing in enlarger lenses?
There's some that are packed up there that have just arrived with a machine.
Are they Roden stock?
And up there, we're still the accredited Roden stock enlarger importer after 40 odd years.
Do you keep some? I can't remember the one you told me was new or refurbished. But
it'd be a Rodagon or Aper Rodagon if it's enlarging.
It was a 150mm.
Yeah, 150. It'd be a Rodagon or an Aper Rodagon.
Just a Rodagon, I think.
Which they don't make them anymore.
No.
That's they're not made. But I've just delivered, I think about a dozen to Kingston University, which have had 22 504s off us this year. Into a brand new darkroom.
Whoa! So that's a sign that things are happening, isn't it?
And in that darkroom also, they've just put.
Hang on. So to say that again, 20.
They've already had about 20 of them, and they exchanged partly exchanged with some 203 small enlargers, 22 504s. So they wanted everything to be 4x5. They had another 5x7 that's from us. They've also bought a 1m40 RA4, 52-inch wide RA4 processor. Not a light jet, but a digital LED printer, 50-inch wide, and a dip and dunk C41 machine. Not just a little roller transport one, dip and dunk at all this year installed into Kingston University.
So in your experience then, in recent times, over the last few years, you've seen a resurgence in the interest of wet
I saw a complete down, when a particular university, we don't want the smelly chemicals anymore, we don't, there's that, the digitals here, now the kids, they're fed up with computers, they go into a darkroom and they see a negative being developed. They can't wait to get it out of the
that's wonderful, isn't it?
to have a look at it. And then get it to make a picture and use their hands and be moving around, not just looking at a screen. And they get quite excited again. Unfortunately, the education authorities and the teachers have got excited again themselves, and because they feel they're progressing, and a bit in the black and white art I've seen in Surgeon. What am I doing? Getting 10/8 enlargers made again. That's instead of refurbish them, because I run out of refurbished enlargers. That's why I had some more made in the 10/8, which is mainly going. But in the degree course in education, they've got an 8x10 at section where I've built 8x10 cameras, and now they need 8x10 enlargers. To like next door.
Have they bought?
They've got one next door.
Because very close to here, because we're down in Brighton.
Yeah.
You've got Intrepid Camera, and they're in Brighton. They're in Hove, I think.
Yeah, do
you have any relationship with them? Have you spoken to those guys?
I have. Yeah, spoken to them and wished them well and get on with it. Yeah, they're doing a great job.
They are, and they've just come out with their own little. Have you seen it? The little what they call an enlarger.
Enlarger,
it's a light source.
It's a light source of
that fits on a tripod.
And fits on the back of their camera.
Have you had one of those to play with? Or?
Not yet. No. I went and talked to them when they were about it. And I want to produce a timer. I said, "Well, produce some for me," but no, they do it their own. They do their own thing, That's but they're doing a great job in once again. You think manufacturing film and paper for photographic products.
I know,
which is great.
It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, it's continuity of it.
And did I see on the website? There's such a thing as a digital enlarger. I'm just making up. Tell us, when I've mentioned this to a few people, they said, "What's a digital enlarger? What's a digital enlarger?"
What's a digital enlarger?
Doesn't sound very interesting to me, I have to say.
It's an invention of myself and my son. It is, you take a digital file and produce a paper print, a wet print. And you use an enlarger, which we take a digital file.
So you don't put a negative. You're not putting any negative.
Not putting any negative whatsoever. We take a digital file and we do an RGB of that digital file layer. That's which we do that electronically, and then we put that into a very very special system. An LCD a panel, which then produces a black and white image, which we then sign. Sign magenta yellow through the various layers of that image to build up a colour picture or a black and white print, and that's all done electronically, But
so you're putting normal black and white. You're putting normal black and white paper still, are you?
Yeah, and they're using everything else.
And you're printing from a digital file.
It's exactly the same. We're printing from a digital file. Yeah,
I can't see why anyone want to use one of those.
There
we go. John's showing me.
Let me just show you.
This is all good radio. John's just showing me some pictures.
Here we are. Now, there's your 5x4 enlarger.
Yeah.
Okay. In there is an electronic panel. That's there. Fed by a control box with all the magic electronics in there, via a normal PC. And this is a enlarger with a it's an old printer head in it, which has got cyan magenta yellow, which drinks through, and there are 9 processes that go on to make one print. Normal print there. There's
Well, I think I just give me an enlarger you can put a negative in. I can't think of anything worse, quite frankly, John.
What we call it is this is a bridge At
a bridge enlarger.
It's a bridge
As
enlarger,
opposed to a bridge
analog and
camera.
digital.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's what it is. Very good for education. And in the early days when we started it, some 15 years or so ago, it saved a lot of photographic
Arts departments.
departments. That's my son's. Because this one used to go around and install them all. Because in the end, we decided that we weren't just giving them out because fingers didn't work properly for people with them. But if we went and installed them and did a live demonstration and a teaching, then we didn't hear any more about them. But if we sent them out and people put them together themselves and tried to do it themselves, working from the instructions, it didn't work. They had to get the whole ethic of it, you know. But that's what we did, and that's what we still.
Do you still
send one or two out.
Get requests for those?
Yeah, they still do one or two.
Okay.
But they are now refurbished ones. If people like London College of Fashion bought 8 of them in one hit.
Right,
You know,
okay.
they've now gone through that thing, and they're now back to their normal darkroom, which I went and serviced about 3 weeks ago.
They've got over their digital craze.
They're
have
over
they?
their digital craze. But, another thing which is very, very interesting, I was down at Southampton Solent University just recently, and their main lecturer there had this group of, let's call them kids, you know, around with cameras in their hand. And I said, what are you doing here? And they said, these are from the fashion department of the college, nothing to do with photography, but the fashion department of the college. And the fashion department now put into their course that actually to work a film camera and make a print. Now in the course, it's just part of their course. That's in the fashion course. He said no. He said they're not in the photographic course for 3 years or whatever. That's the fashion bit, and they're down here for a few days, a week, to actually see a film camera, load of film camera, and actually make a print. So that's another part of the photographic course in a university, which is moving on.
Well, I mean, it's all very well being able to make a print, but as we get the resurgence in analog photography, which we're clearly seeing,
we are seeing.
it's the availability of cameras. You know, the film cameras are going up on eBay.
Yeah.
There's nobody making a new film camera now. That's going to be the issue, unless someone comes along in 20, 30 years time. You know, we'll all
if
be.
you look at eBay today, you're at £200 at enlarger. There is up to £700, £800, about £1,400 or so on this morning. You know, that's I pay more to buy it for me, but they get us as well if they buy one. But it's so that's the sort of the brief onward going off and the start of Odyssey. We call ourselves Odyssey De Vere, say Odyssey being the family company, our partnership. We're a partnership, and the partnership, our family own Devere. That's
well, John, we'll probably call it a day here. Hopefully, we've got something we can put out. The podcast will be put out this coming Friday.
Oh, there you go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
It's all right. Well done. Thanks a lot. That's don't mind going through the old times.
I know.
Test the memory a bit, doesn't it?